Falling Walls Circle, Challenges and Foresight.
Welcome to the Falling Walls Plenary Table, the future of transatlantic science relations.
Okay, welcome everyone. It's wonderful to be here. First plenary panel of the day. And we have a very important topic, transatlantic relationship and how it's changing. You all know it's changing very rapidly. My name is Patrick Kramer. I'm a molecular biologist, and I'm currently serving as president of the Max Planck Society. Maybe to get us started, I can give you a few numbers from the Max Planck Society. Actually, the United States is our most important cooperation partner. If you look at what we're doing together with colleagues in the US, there's almost 1,000 ongoing research projects that we do together. Each year, we publish about 4,000 papers together with American colleagues. And already now, 10% of our directors actually have a US passport. So we were always very tightly connected to our friends across the Atlantic. And as you can imagine, now we are watching what's happening there with the new administration and how science is changing with great concern. It's the cuts, of course, which make things very difficult. But it's also that we feel when we talk to colleagues that many of them are intimidated. Many of them are insecure about the future, about their own career, but also about their work. And this makes us sad. It causes a lot of issues in our collaboration. But I also think it will have many implications in the broader sense, how it will change how we do science. It will change how the world is working together on global challenges. But we do have so many challenges. Think about climate change. Think about demographic changes, biodiversity. There are so many issues that we have to address together. Also issues in the social sciences and so forth. That we do need to work closely together also in the future. And so what we want to discuss today with experts from both sides of the Atlantic, thank you all for coming, is exactly this. What is the current status? That will be our first round of these transatlantic relations. What is changing? And then in the second round, what about the future? What should we do, provided that the situation is as it is? What can we do in order to advance global science? So let me introduce briefly the people who joined me here on the table. First of all, we have Robert Dijkgraaf, who is president-elect of the International Science Council and former Dutch Minister of Education, Culture and Science. Welcome, Robert. And then we have Pradeep Khosla, who is actually Chancellor of the University of California at San Diego, actually very big university. The budget is maybe 4 or 5 times of the largest German university. A warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
And then we welcome Bettina Martin. She is Minister of Science, Culture, Federal and European Affairs in the beautiful northern state in Germany of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. Welcome. Thank you. And last but not least, we have Ibrahim Yimmer, who is Vice President Research of the National Research Council in Canada. Thank you for joining us. So I would really like to start, of course, with one of our American friends and colleagues, Pradeep, and ask you, first of all, what is the situation in Canada at the University of California right now? And also, how do the changes that you experienced over the last half year or so, how does that influence the way your university and the colleagues can interact with Europeans and collaborate?
So thank you, Patrick, and good morning, everybody. And it's a great honor to be here. So let me just say a few seconds about the University of California. It is the largest public university system in the US, with a total budget of about $55 billion, of which UC San Diego is one of 10 campuses, and we are more than $10 billion. So the 4 campuses that are really large in the system. So this system, it's actually amazingly, our claim to fame recently is in 3 days, we had 5 Nobel Prizes this year. No, all the 5 of the Nobel Prizes were from the UC system, right? So that is the powerhouse the UC system is, and that's the powerhouse that each one of our campuses is. Over the last 6 months, there has been a lot of, as you can imagine, angst in the country about what's happening to the universities. And I just want to say, I look at it slightly differently. I think there are 3 different things happening. One is there are individual universities that are being targeted for whatever reason. The second is something that people don't talk about, which is as we speak, as the government is closed, our research budget has not been approved. So what is called the discretionary spending of the US, the 9 bills that are pending are in this session right now, but the government is closed. In that budget, if we go with what the president has proposed, US would lose 50% of its research funding. And 50% of its research funding is actually a very significant number because the US government investment is about $120 billion in research, right? So I am more concerned. So vis-a-vis what is happening in the country, the UC San Diego has not been targeted, but UCLA has. But I'm more concerned about if this budget passes and we are cut 50% in the country, forget UC San Diego, we would take 20 to 30 years to come back to where we are today. And why is this significant to the US? Because if you look at post-World War II, this would fundamentally change the compact the US government had with the US universities, which is you do the research, we will pay you to do research, we will not build a parallel government infrastructure as big, which is very different than many of the European countries or Asian countries. And the US universities are powerhouses when it comes to research. So I think that's going to fundamentally change. I think our ability to produce PhD is going to change. I think our industry is primarily driven by science and technology. So the US S&P 500 market cap is close to $60 trillion, driven a lot by the PhDs and the masters and the undergrads, but primarily PhDs and masters generated out of the universities. That's going to go down, which is going to impact innovation in companies. The likelihood there'll be a $6 trillion company in the next 30 years, I think becomes close to very low, given where we are right now. So overall, I'm really concerned about how the research investment is going to fundamentally change the nature of the university, the nature of society, and the nature of the compact we have, and our quality of life. So that's my view right now. But having said that, the US has gone through difficult situations in the past. It's always come back in a good way. So I'm still very bullish. I'm optimistic, but pragmatically pessimistic.
Well, thanks for these very clear words. And I mean, you confirm the concerns that I think we all have here. Let me turn to your neighboring country, North Canada. Ibrahim, you're in the Canadian Research Council. Traditionally, of course, the US must have been always your prime partner. Yeah. But then Canada, of course, even with the French-speaking community, has very strong ties to Europe also. So you're in a special situation. How do you look at these developments that you see in the US, and how does that change the way the scientists or your organization are thinking about how to deal with these changes?
Yeah. Thank you, Patrick, and it's a pleasure for me to be here. Of course, I'm from the National Research Council of Canada, which is most people mistaken us just as funding agencies, but we actually do also research and innovation, technological innovation. Of course, we partner with a number of US institutions, and as you said, with European institutions as well. I think the view from Canada is, I think, twofold. It depends which way you're looking, whether you're looking south or whether you're looking east across the Atlantic. The impression that we have, because of geography and history, we have got a lot of partnership with U.S. institutions. That is strained, obviously. It's the same way that you view it from here. We see pressure on academic freedom in the U.S., sort of creating some mobility of talent. I think we see that as actually a positive outcome, if you will, because research and innovation thrives on international partnership. You mentioned the Nobel Awards. If you look all of the Nobel Awards, the breakthroughs happen across borders and so on. So I think this brain circulation that we feel in the U.S. side can potentially be positive in the long term, as long as we maintain, institutional relationships with the organizations. Now, if I look east, though, things look actually much more rosy because, as you said, I think Canada has historical relationship with Europe. We share a lot of common values on academic freedom, on policy, evidence-based policy making, for example. And there is actually a lot of foundation to build on. Since I'm in Germany here, I can probably point out that if you look at the S&T partnership between Germany and Canada alone, next year we're going to be celebrating 55 years. So there's a long tradition of it. So I think the view is, how do we actually even increase that? How can we actually go beyond that? And we are increasing this through, whether collaboration platforms. I would probably cite increasing our partnership in the Horizon Europe. Just talking, we became a partner in there on Pillar 2. We're NRC represents Canada in Robert's organization, for example. These are international organizations. And there is more like that, like Canada is part of the Eureka network, and we are also, part of the European Space Agency, for example. So we are increasing that partnership, I would say, in many ways. Here I am on my first time in Falling Walls. We like to enhance that, and I'm sure there's a number of Canadian science leaders who are here as well. So the view east-wide, I would say, is how can we actually strategically increase our, build on that foundation. But southwards, there's a lot of strain for sure, just like the way you view it. But I think I also take the positive aspect of it. In fact, the brain circulation eventually will benefit science.
Can I follow up with a question there? Because here in the press, there were several prominent cases reported where scientists, intellectuals would move from the US over to Canada and giving interviews saying that it was because of issues of academic freedom. I mean, this can be, of course, in the humanities, in the social sciences, but also earth system sciences and other fields. How do you deal with that? On the one hand, of course, you don't want to weaken your partner, the science in the US. On the other hand, if individuals say they have to leave, they cannot do their work anymore for whatever reason, could be funding, could be also that this kind of topic is not allowed or not supported anymore that they work on, and they come to Canada and they knock on your door. How do you deal with it? Do you have a program where you accommodate those colleagues so that they are rescued and they can continue their work? Is there a scheme that you have set up?
It's interesting you're asking that question because that was what I was looking actually last night. First of all, the intent is not just to poach your partner, right? To push talent. It's actually trying, as you put it, is to provide opportunities or a refuge, if you will, while maintaining again, relationship with the institutions, not weakening the institutions in the U.S. That's not the intent. So the programs that I see that's popping up in Canada happens at various levels. I would say, there are universities, institutions themselves are actually running out programs. I can cite, for example, the 3 leading universities in Quebec have put forward something called a Polaris platform. It essentially creates positions for senior researchers, but as well as young and upcoming talent that includes postdocs and graduate students or PhD students. The Toronto University Health Network is another example. If you could just look at just one institution alone, which is very large, the largest research institution in health sciences in Canada, have also a program like that. And just this week, our federal government have put out our budget, and there they put in a significant amount of funding there to the tune of about $1.7 billion that actually will support both. Again, senior researchers creating accelerated chair positions, if you will, as well as, again, assistant professors and graduate students. As well as even, increasing funding towards, building in scientific infrastructure, because not only you invite them, but you have to kind of provide the tools as well. So there are programs that's happening at various levels. So it's at the institution level, but also, I would say, at the government level.
Before we move to Germany and ask our minister for her opinion, let's first ask the former minister from the Netherlands. What is your opinion, Robert? When you look at your country, but also Europe as a whole, have we realized these dramatic changes that we just heard about? Are people reacting, or are people kind of frozen, that they don't know what to do and they want to keep, they stick to what they're used to, but actually don't realize that we have to take action? Or what is your opinion? Is Europe already reacting in a way it should to this new situation?
Well, Patrick, that's a good question. And by the way, very happy to be back here at Falling Walls. Sometimes joke, there are these 5 stages of grief, and I think we're all in another phase. I would say that, from the Netherlands perspective, I think in the European Union, probably we are the most transatlantic-oriented country. By the way, also personally, I spent 10 years directing the Institute of Advanced Study in Princeton, so I feel very, very strong connection to the United States. And I think there are several things that we have to realize. First of all, we have a discussion here in Europe that we have been living under the US security umbrella for a long time. I think we also have been the world has been living under the US science umbrella for a long time. The US has been incredibly generous supporting international science. There are many European scientists with NIH grants, etc. And the second, that the US is also a prime destination also from European talent. If you look at a big US university like yours, you see the whole world. So really, whatever's happening in the United States is influencing the global research system. And I think 2 things where I'm particularly worried about. First of all, just the uncertainty and the volatility, which means that, say, the next generation of researchers, graduate students, postdocs, are probably run a risk of becoming kind of a lost generation, because just the number of jobs opportunities globally will decrease. And I think this is something that we should realize. And the second thing is, whatever the outcome of the intense budget negotiations, even if the volume of US public R&D funding remains constant, clearly it gets shifted in a different direction. There are certain fields where it's climate change, biodiversity, public health, vaccines, gender, women's health, where there will be gaps. And I think this is something where the rest of the world, particularly Europe, should think in terms of being complementary, and I feel would kind of step up. And what you see is, of course, certain programs in the Netherlands, in many European countries, also in the European Union, to have increased budgets to attract talent. But my recommendation would be really step up the opportunities for young people, because I think we run a certain risk. And then finally, if you look at what are the forces bringing those changes, and indeed kind of questioning this compact between governments and the research enterprise, it pains me to say that some of those currents we also see in Europe. We have seen them in the Netherlands. It's a more inward-looking attitude. It's looking at science really through the lens of economic competitiveness, national security. Seeing universities through a populist view as being elitist, etc. So those forces are all around us. So I think, there's also something that, as a scientific community, we have to address collectively, because in some sense we're all in the same boat.
I'm very glad that you mentioned that we owe a lot to American science and to our colleagues there, and also the taxpayer there. I don't know if everybody knows here in the audience, we have 3,500 different scientific resources in the world. So that can be databases, can be collections of samples, you name it. Out of those, 1,200 are set up, maintained, paid for by the US. So more than 1/3. So the US did take leadership after the war, but they also served the global community. And this, driving force was important for everyone. And it brought wealth to many regions of the world. And we should never forget that. And, if this force gets weaker, that's my understanding, then everybody will suffer, or most people, because they would be connected to that in a global system. But now let's talk about Germany. Bettina, Martin, you are one of those ministers who actually, if I may say that, really understand what scientists need. And they understand, that we have to take action, that as soon as we just accept the way it is, we will lose ground. We will not stay at the forefront. By the way, very good Max Planck Institutes in your state of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. I'm always there with great pleasure to be there and meet colleagues. But what I wanted to ask you, when you look at the changes in the US and we complain about the polarization and we complain about the populist views, and we complain about, how academic freedom is deteriorating. But what about Europe? What about Germany? Don't we see it here?
Well, that's absolutely would be what I wanted to say anyway. I mean, we do look across the Atlantic, and I'm really worried. And it's also not just being worried; it really interferes with our activities in Europe. So, science is always international, and we need a strong partner. And one of our most important partners, if not the most important partner, is the United States and its scientific community. So, if that's weakened, if that's shifting, the international research community is going to shift. Ultimately, I think it has a huge impact on what's happening in Europe, but also looking across the Atlantic doesn't mean that we're kind of on high grounds and don't see very similar developments. In Germany, I can only talk for Germany, we have a strong right-wing populist development, and the discourse we hear, that I hear in the parliament every month for days, is from the right-wing populists is very similar, if not the same, like what we hear in the States. And so we have to see how we become resilient and how politics can, and that's my job basically, together with my colleagues in the Länder, how we can make the system more resilient. And I think the universities also now preventively, because we are lucky we still have the democratic parties governing the country in all Länder, but we have to see how we can make also work together with universities to see where are the loopholes, where can right-wing populists kind of move into the institutions, and we have to be very careful about that. And I would also like to say that you just mentioned it. It's not just the funding. It's the discourse in general. It's the words that you can't use anymore in your applications. It's also the platforms, the data platforms that are being closed. And we so desperately need them. So Germany, and that's on the federal level, we're trying to kind of save, or maybe create twins for saving the data, because we all depend on this. So I think it's a problem that's in Europe to be seen too. In Germany, I can only say we have to be very careful about the elections that are coming up next year in 4 states in Germany. That the Democratic Party stay strong, because as I said, the discourse is the same.
I think we are getting in that situation where scientists, together with science policymakers, politicians, need to explain again and again, why do we need science?
Right.
Life would not be as it is now without science.
Right.
And it's not just the health system, it really goes across everything that we are experiencing in our everyday life. So we have to do that homework, and I think it's important that politicians and scientists join forces to explain to the taxpayer and to the general public why it's needed and what we are doing. So thank you for your support there. Can I continue with another question? And maybe we slowly move from describing what we currently experience and understanding the situation. Maybe we move towards action. So about the future. What is the future of the transatlantic partnership, and what is the future of science globally? What kind of changes, not so much do we see, but what kind of changes do we want to induce and support? Where do we want to go? That should maybe be our second round of discussion. And maybe, Bettina, Martin, I can continue with you because it nicely connects what you just said. You know, when you now as a politician think about how to deal with the situation, you have already described nationally, we have homework to do, but with respect to international relations, with respect to our relationship to the US, on the one hand, of course, we want to strengthen that relationship in difficult times. We want to be good partners. We want to be reliable partners. On the other hand, we see people knocking at the door. We see that talent is dropping out of the scientific system because they get emails that the fellowship ends, or there's no job offers anymore at the big universities, or very few. So how would you deal with that balance? It's a very difficult, very delicate balance. What would you recommend, or what kind of actions would you take as a politician in Europe?
Germany is taking action in that, and it is a very, very delicate balance. We have this Global Minds initiative from the federal government where we have 50 million euros next year. This year already 27 million to attract talent from all over the world. And let's face it, it's not just the US where science is under pressure. So it's basically for talent all over the world. But there we have to be very careful that we don't tear down bridges that we need, that we walk over to or walk across. For me, it's very interesting to see where's the German talent that moved over to the States and that is interested in moving back. And I come from the very northeastern state in Germany, where a lot of people moved away, and not just in the science world. So to see where's the talent, where can we, attract the people to come back? That's one point. But I strongly believe that we now, under the political, level, we need to strengthen our collaboration in the science world with the United States. Not just say, hey, we're going to get the talent over. I think we should strengthen our ties on the collaboration on the research level beneath, the political sphere. And I think that's happening. I know that our universities are going over more than they have before to the States and try to strengthen and try to say, hey, what do you need? Universities, what do you need from us? How can we support? And I think that's very important, because I share your optimism. The United States are resilient, hopefully, that this is a phase and that we will be strong again together.
Would you agree that we have to grow up in Europe in the sense that we take more responsibility for global science? I mean, databases is one thing, but would you agree? And how do we coordinate that effort in Europe?
I absolutely agree, and I think the European Union is already taking steps towards that. We just talked about Horizon Europe and Canada participating, which I think is a very good move. And we hope that within the next framework, the next 7 years after 27, that we will almost double, this is the plan, the research fund of Horizon Europe, whatever name it will have then. But I think Europe has understood that we need to invest more into science and not less, even though our budgets are very tight after all these crises. And I think Europe has understood that we need to collaborate with other countries, and maybe a word to China, because if Europe, that's a chance now for Europe, together with our partners abroad, to get stronger, because if we don't act, China will. China has already. So I think in order to be on the safe side with people who evidence-based policy and the belief of free science, academic freedom, we need to get stronger together. So I think Europe is understanding this. We're getting there.
Robert, would you share that opinion? Maybe a word again to what Max Planck did in that situation. In April, we went over. We had, I think, 24 or so meetings, and we, in the end, after talking to many of our colleagues and policymakers and foundations, we said we will set up the Max Planck Transatlantic program.
Yeah.
And that has these two aims. So on the one hand, we will set up half a dozen new collaborative centers with leading institutions in the US, also using, funding from foundations. So basically to do the opposite, not to isolate ourselves like we see in many parts of the world, but to strengthen the partnership with new centers, new incentives. But on the other hand, also for those talent, to prevent this dropout of talent from the scientific system, which is a global system. I mean, 4 of my people who were in my lab are now professors in the US. I was in the US. Our son is now in the US. So it's an exchange of talent, and we would love to continue that. But would you think that that is possible throughout the European Union, that we all adopt to that dual strategy, or would you have what would
No,
your
I think
advice?
I strongly agree what has been said. I think geopolitics is too important to leave to politicians. I think the scientific community, we're not in the first row, say, of this geopolitical theater. In the second ring, the politicians are in the splash zone. but so it's incredibly important, I think, that the autonomous forces of the scientific community, whether it's the universities, the foundations, philanthropy, step up. Because actually, if you look long term, it's really very encouraging trend that, collaboration across the world has been increasing very rapidly. If you look at these kind of maps of international collaboration, they look like the magazine, your in-flight magazine. You see all these different connections, and that's a very strong trend. So we know globalization is working in science. We need to collaborate. And we have had difficult periods in geopolitical times, but often we have seen very ambitious programs coming out of the scientific community. So I think actually this is really a moment for scientists to kind of step up, but also to address this issue that we all feel we are transitioning to somehow a new world, and it's very uncertain. But somehow we have to reinvent this kind of consensus that was there with us for the past 80 years. And I think that's kind of exciting. It probably involves a much broader interaction with society. Science has become much more powerful. It delivers much more goods. So I think actually to jointly kind of reinvent the position of science in society is a terrific project. And I think we can learn from each other. But I think the most important thing is that scientists have to step up in time of crisis.
To our friends from the US and Canada, how do you look at Europe, and what would you recommend? Let's say if you could influence, and you should, the science policy here in Europe, what would you recommend in that situation? What would be good for you? What would be good for the collaboration? What would be good for the world in that situation that we're in?
So if I had my magic wand, I would think there would be somebody who would look at science holistically across the world. And I think, Robert, you said something about we need to be complementary. This is the time for Europe to pick up where there will be slack in the US. This is a time, at the end of the day, science is the driving force for quality of life. There's no doubt about it. It is generating value. It is generating wealth. It is bringing people from lower middle class to upper middle class, regardless of where you are. China, India, Indonesia, Europe, US, everywhere it's the same story, different extents, right? So I think if you look at the wealthiest part of the world right now, which would be the EU, UK, and the US, including North America, including Canada. This is the world that has to really uplift everybody. It cannot be fighting with each other. And I think so the more we can be complementary in our policy making, in our intellectual property, in our collaboration, the more we have open science, the more we have shared intellectual property, the better off we are. So this is my view as a scientist, because I think the more science that is open, the more progress we as humanity make.
Ibrahim.
Well, I couldn't agree more. Science is a bridge, to these divided, regions of scientific, exploration, if you will. So we need to continue to build on that. But if I may, in this first round, we just talked about the erosion of public trust on science, and I think I think it's important to recognize, first of all, it's not just one region, it's not just for a short period of time, one term, etc. It's part of a longer trend, and it's also all around us. I think we just talked about. I think science needs to focus more on restoring that public trust. So what does that mean? I think we need to focus a little bit more. We're in an era of rapid transformation. Just think of AI, think of quantum, etc. We can focus more on, let's say, the responsible use of AI or ethical AI. That has got the added value of actually, while these rapid science discoveries happen, but there is always keep in mind that public trust. I'm happy to mention, our government has just created an AI safety institute now recently, and which my own organization plus a number of institutes in Canada are participating on. But it's open. It's part of the international network of AI institutes. But it's also very open for collaboration. I think we need to kind of collaborate again in using this bridge to focus on those areas where we can restore that public trust. And maybe the last thing I would say. I'm a firm believer of this triple helix model. You do have science, you do have politics, or policy, but you don't have industry. Industry is important because it's related to industry is important to science, and industry is also global. They have got global markets to access. They have got employees across borders. I think we need to look at structuring programs. Horizon Europe, we just talked about it. That kind of program that kind of hits both the participation of industry and science together. And we try to do, in fact, I'm in Germany. I like to give an example of Germany. With our partners here in Germany, we construct programs that brings industry and scientific institutions together to solve a problem. A specific problem. That's how we demonstrate that we can actually rely on. So maybe those are a couple of points in terms of where do we go.
Before I give the word again to the minister, please prepare a few questions that you may have in your mind, because we will have a couple of minutes for questions. But please, Bettina Martin.
I would just like to add something about the idea how can we provide more trust within society into science, and I think we have work to do there. In Germany, I don't know about the other countries. And I would just like to tell the story about the Corona times when in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, in our state, we had two scientists at the cabinet table with us to talk, because nobody knew what to do, So we listened to the scientists, and we made the decisions, of course, as politicians, but they told us what they thought and what their findings were. And I think this idea of really getting closer into contact and daring to talk about the results of science and what can we use from that for politics, for society in general. I think this coming down from the ivory tower. I mean, I know it's a bad word and you're not in the ivory tower, you guys, but sometimes you are. And I think people, the society, the citizens, they need to understand what's happening because, as you said, billions of dollars or euros go into the system, and I think they also have a right to understand. And I think this getting closer and debating what can we use from what you are working at, and of course we make the decisions, but you need to explain. And I think a lot has been done in Germany. I think over the few years after Corona, a lot has happened in that respect. But I think that's a very important point for people.
Thank you for emphasizing this again. I think you put it very well. I mean, science cannot replace politics. No. It's not enough to say follow the science. That's not enough. But we have to provide the evidence. We have to talk about chances that stem from our results, but also the risks, and provide that evidence to the political process. I think that is what we should do.
Can I make one comment quickly? I think what is lost on people is a crisis like the coronavirus was a great example of when the world came together. to solve the crisis through collaborative development and manufacture of the vaccine. It was an unbelievable collaboration that we have never seen before. So,
yeah, take the mRNA vaccines.
right.
Yeah. So now we are open for questions. I can see there was in the second row. I think you were first. So please wait for the microphone.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting. I come from the UK, where a large portion of our public money for research is attached to public engagement. And I'm not saying we have all the answers at all, but I've heard a lot over the last few days that we should be engaging with the public, we should be explaining the importance of science. And I just wanted to ask, how do you do that concretely? Is it that we make communication a compulsory part of PhDs? You know, you have your viva, you have your thesis, but you also have to pass this. Do we have to go into schools, into museums? How do we liberate up that time from their schedules as well? So essentially, what can we concretely do?
Who wants to?
So I can quickly say, so
please.
we are part of something called the AAU, which is the Association of American Universities, like 64 of us, the top institutions. And we have now a campaign, UC San Diego, that's called Behind Every Breakthrough. We are paying for it ourselves, basically describing simple breakthroughs like, for example, the most recent one is if you have testicular cancer, before you could not really do a blood test to diagnose the cancer, but now you can, like literally as of 3 weeks ago. So we go out there and we bombard the airwaves, the YouTube channels, I was going to say TV, but it's YouTube channels, Instagram channels, with conversations like that in simple English. No use of medical terminology, no scientific use of no genetics, but just simple English. How is it changing everybody's life? And I can tell you, even when the president has proposed a 50% budget cut, the US Senate refuses to accept a 50% budget cut. So that's why I'm pragmatically bullish about what's going to happen. So.
Other questions? I don't know. Please.
Thank you. I wanted to raise the following issue that is very often the scientists have been using in recent years, the idea that we are moving to a knowledge society, and that was an argument to develop science. On the other hand, where people have the feeling that they don't belong to this knowledge society, they feel excluded. So I think we have to be very careful with the kind of arguments we are using to defend science and to defend knowledge.
Robert?
I think this is a very good point, and it's also reflects an issue that we have been discussing. If you think where some of the fault lines are in society about support of science or not, they increasingly according to kind of the kind of education, so more practical versus more theoretical. And I think this is very worrying, because if the support base of universities is among those who went to university, that actually will be self-defeating. So it's very important, I think, that we show that research is something that is beneficial to all. In fact, that you can also participate in research in many ways. I think those who do vocational technical training and jobs, they're also part of the research community. So I think this is, I see the greatest challenge, to make sure that the benefits of science, but also the way you can be involved, is something that is across society. I think we have a terrific track record of science being a social engine, that there's opportunities for talent all around. But I think there should be truth in advertising, I feel. And so this is again part of this re-establishing this kind of social compact to make sure that this is actually beneficial to everyone. And indeed, just thinking in terms of the benefits being in the kind of knowledge workers, I think that might be a trap that you don't want to fall into.
Other questions? Yes, please. Maybe here in the back. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. Really great discussions here. I come from more of a sort of innovation and industry background, so really great to hear your point around industry. So we're seeing growing industry is playing a sort of growing role in R&D, research. And they are also very prominent in building those transatlantic or international collaborations. How do we think that sort of the scientists and the industry can build closer collaborations to build those global networks, because they're playing more of a role in sort of building those diplomatic relations as well. So how do we build a closer relationship between scientists and industry?
Who wants to answer?
Maybe I'll give it a shot, but because it brought up the using industry as a partner for science to build bridges. We as I said, we're living in a very interesting times. How progress in science and innovation actually connects to the bottom line of those companies really fast. And innovation is happening at a much faster rate. So there are scientists within industry, I would say. Just think of Amazon or Google or any of those organizations that actually are innovating on a regular basis or at a faster rate. I think it's building, scientists in the universities or university institutions are building those relationships with industry, scientist to scientist on both topics is what we need to do more. The people is a connection, I would say, which is the science practitioners in industry and the science practitioners in university institutions are the bridge. Now, of course, when you are a scientist and you're working in one country versus another, there are different rules, and you have to go through different immigration rules, let's say. But I think this has to take its own local nature, obviously, right? It cannot be just one size fits all. So it may be different from region to region. I acknowledge that. But just in general, I would say it's the people-to-people relationship, the secondments in industry between the universities and industry, and the partnership is what will help, I think, in the long term.
Can I make a counterintuitive point? Brittany, did you want to say? Go ahead.
Yes, I just want to make one remark to this, because I think the government can set a framework for better cooperation between industry, companies, and science by creating hubs, by financing hubs, competence centers, we call them in Germany, where you invite companies, industry to work together closely with, for example, I don't know, technology, certain areas of the universities in the local areas, and that can work even not just only with the big universities, but also with the small universities of applied sciences. So, and it's super interesting because it connects to the idea of how can we connect science better into society, because it has a direct impact into the regional society with the small companies, with the people who work there. So this is a very good way to connect science and society by creating jobs too. Yeah. So
we only have 30 seconds, so everyone gets one sentence, and it will be not a German sentence, it will be an English sentence. Okay. So how can we keep the positive spirit in our transatlantic partnership?
Move from competition to complementarity.
I would make a counterintuitive point. I think we need to be afraid of industry. Industry is becoming so rich right now that they have more money than the governments do. And they can control technology in ways that has never happened before, AI being a great example. So I think we need to be careful as to how we support science across the world, because we need to be careful about that industry.
Let's stay in contact and talk.
I think let's broaden this transatlantic science, not just with one organization or with one country, but much more. The world is much more interconnected than before. And I think there is a lot to be gained by broadening that view.
And maybe I can add that we have to look beyond the transatlantic partnership. And right now, we keep our fingers crossed that in Belém, in Brazil, they follow the science in the sense that they realize that they have to do something. And we did actually make suggestions what to do, international carbon pricing and so forth. So let's hope that this will happen. Thanks, everyone. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.